right, so back again here with another topic, another big topic of discussion here we wanted to get to.
Yeah, this time we want to talk a little bit about taking decks that you're not happy with and what do you do with them?
Yeah,
We've
exactly.
all been there, right? We've all had decks where we put them together. We're so excited about them. We put them together. We found all the cards. And,
buying cards, buying cards,
tried
looking
a
at
couple
them.
times, and then we're just like, you know what? I tried it a few times. This deck just isn't what I wanted it to be. So what do you do? What do you do in that case? I think the easy one and the one we're probably going to spend the least time upon is just abandon it.
Yeah.
Take it apart. Use the cards elsewhere where you can, and if not, put them in a box or resell them. That's the simplest answer, but we want to offer you more ideas.
Yeah, I think unless you really want those cards in some other thing, I think abandon is probably the simplest one and probably the one you want to do the least, right?
Right.
So just for an example, I think it'd be nice to talk about the actual decks that this has happened to us with, and what we've done with them, right?
Yeah.
We did an episode a long time ago called No Fun or something, or No Fun Decks. Yeah. And that was based around, oddly enough, two Azorius decks, which is weird, but it was based around Sean's Brago deck and my Bruna Light of Alabaster deck. And I know for that one, specifically for me, and you can go back and listen to the episode, I can't remember which one it is, but it was mostly around the fact that like the deck was only doing one thing, and it was all or nothing. If it did that thing, it was pretty good, and it could win. And if that thing was at all disrupted or stopped, the deck basically didn't do anything. And in those situations, it's just a matter of diversifying your threats and looking at do you have a way to stop that disruption if that's going to be that bad, and adding in those tools that you need, right? So definitely for me at the time, I was not as experienced with deck building. I think Bruno was my third or fourth deck I ever built. So looking back at those cards that I had, like I was like bouncing Bruno to my hand and stuff, and like to save all the things. And I was like, I just could just run counter spells. Like, why was I bothering with all this like recasting of my commander and all this stuff? So definitely like some inexperience was a factor there. But
yeah, so it seems like we've identified. So the reason you weren't happy with this deck was we can put on the Brew, right?
Yep.
The Brew you put together wasn't efficient enough. Maybe it was too narrow in scope, or there wasn't enough interaction, something like that.
Definitely a combination of those things for sure.
Yeah, I'm going through something similar. A recent episode, I'm still obsessed with the Great Aurora as a card. We did an episode on an achievement unlocked on it, and I have taken that deck. I have a Naya version of it that wants to find either the Great Aurora or Warp World, which are both cards that are similar in that they just take everything off of the board and kind of do some crazy stuff with it.
Right.
But the problem is you need a lot of tokens to make them work because you want a lot of permanents. So I went with Naya. But then you need the cards themselves. So this is a problem with the Brew for me. I've never been able to pull it off yet because I either don't have all the tokens out that I want when I have the cards, or I have the board, but I don't have the cards to make it happen, or I have a bit of both, but too many of my opponents just keep wrathing the board, or maybe one of my opponents has a million more permanents. I would do it anyway in that case just to see what happens at this point. But so for me, that's the Brew too. So both of us have identified there's a Brew problem. So what do you do? What do you change? How do we change these?
Well, I mean, with Bruno, what we did was I basically just took a whole new approach to it and added lots of cards that were more useful and better, and it was just basically becoming a better brewer and just brewing simply a better deck. with your Great Aurora, what have you done? What do you think you could do?
Well, I'm in the process of it. So one thing that I did was I added a little bit more like of those protection cards in white that kind of protect your whole team from board wraths, that sort of thing.
So something like Rootborn Defenses, for example.
Something like a Rootborn Defenses, Make a Stand, currently an M19, that sort of thing. Teferi's Protection, you know, if you want to spend a few more bucks on it, that's a card that works there too. But I think the solution, which I'm about to do next, then I'm going to try next, is a big one. I'm going to rebrew the deck, and I'm going to take out white, and I'm going to add blue. I'm going to make it teamer. Because, like you said, I don't need to protect my creatures with fancy indestructible stuff, because not all wraths destroy. Some wraths exile.
Yeah, or bounce.
Or put on the bottom of library, that sort of thing. So blue now gives me counter spells to cover that, and I get to sneak in a couple of instant or sorcery tutors to help me find the key cards that I want. Normally, I'm not a brewer that likes to put a ton of tutors in the deck. I feel like just put cards that are fun, but at least this way, I will be able to do what I want to do. That's all I want to do, so let me help that strategy out.
Well, the other thing is, like, to combat tutors is card draw. Right. So if you don't want to put a ton of tutors in, just put more card draw in, which will dig you to your combo pieces or your answers or whatever it is you're looking for faster. True. Right. So I'd say blue is another great addition for that reason. Sometimes you just need to look at the color pie, and maybe the thing that your deck wants to do or needs to do is something that's actually offered by a totally different color altogether. Yeah.
And so in both these cases, neither of the decks are like commander dependent. I'll try to find a commander that helps the strategy, but I'm starting with a strategy before I start with a commander.
Right.
I have that luxury.
I have another deck here that's been giving me the same kind of, like, it's sort of different, but similar-ish problems. It's been a Ghoul-Caller Gisa deck. I've been wanting to brew, and I have brewed a mono black zombies deck for Commander using Ghoul-Caller Gisa. I got her with the 2014 Commander product. Now she's a little bit pricey these days. How much is she? Let's see. She looks like it's around like $15 for this card. So this is a sought after card. She's a very, very good card. And basically what you want to do is get a ton of zombies out, and then just like have them have cool synergies going on, tribal synergies, drawing cards when you're casting them, and so on. But what I find, and I just kind of want this to be kind of just like a value deck. I just kind of wanted to be able to get stuff back from my graveyard whenever I liked, or, you know, if someone's trying to remove one of my good creatures, I can just sacrifice them, and that's not a problem for zombies. Obviously, we can just recur that and all that kind of stuff. But the way it ends up playing out is that you don't actually. You don't play your zombies incrementally. You kind of wait for a turn, and then you like combo off with them and get like 20 or 30 at once, and then the next turn you attack or something, or somehow if you can give them haste, but I don't think we really can in mono black. But so that's not really what I wanted. Like for this deck's problem, it actually turns out. So obviously the brew is kind of always going to be the problem a little bit, but what it is that it's the strategy that is effective here. That's different. So, and
would you say that sort of, can we tie that in? Is that maybe me being an issue of how your deck fits in with the meta of the table of your group?
That is a good question. I think that has an impact, but I would say it's more likely the makeup of the cards in the deck. So again, the brew, but it's hard to get away from that when you're using I'm using you know, zombie cards. I'm using zombie tribal stuff that isn't necessarily from the look of this. When I put this deck together, I wasn't like, this is going to be a sweet like combo deck. It's going to go in one turn. It's going to go off and kill people. I was like, this will be great. I'll incrementally gain value and have a bunch of zombies out. It'll be hard to attack into me because I'll have a million chump blockers, and I'll be attacking. At one point I will be able to attack really well, but I didn't expect it to all happen so quickly like that. So yeah, it's the strategy the deck wants to use, and it's also so it's kind of what you were saying is like, is it the meta? I'd say it's less the meta and more like my play style. So if I'm not gonna just run things out into other threats. I don't want to look like I'm the threat before I can actually protect myself or my commander or whatever it is, right? Like, so for her, she's fairly fragile because and she's not the commander. It's not like the commander's like the, you know, the only thing I care about in the deck. Like, she's very helpful. She's basically just like a huge bonus, but it's just so good that when you do get her out, it does kind of work like a combo deck. Like, you do kind of want to use her to get a bunch more zombies. And in case you're not sure, she's the one who you pay black and tap her and sack a creature, and that's she makes 2/2 zombie. The number of 2/2 zombies equal to that creature's power. So if you sacrifice a 6/6, you're getting 12 2/2 or 12 power and toughness on the board. You're getting 6 zombies. So
let's talk. I want to talk for a second. So you've got this deck that looks good. It looks fun. It has fun interactions in it. It's fun to play, quote unquote. But it hasn't always been the most fun to play for you. So I think our two options then, besides abandoning it and like just getting rid of it, we could upgrade it and just change it and change the brew. But if we want to look at the meta, we don't always have the luxury of changing who we play with. Sometimes our play group is our play group, but it's sometimes worthwhile, once your play group all have a collection of decks, to start categorizing them with your meta, to just say that, like, hey, talking about it is a good thing too. Like, I have this deck and it seems to be fun, but it just never is fun when we play in this method. Maybe the rest of you have similar decks, and maybe those decks that we think never play out fun would actually be very fun together, right? A lot of people will say this when the Commander precons come out, that on their own, they don't look that powerful or synergistic, but they do, to their credit, design them so that they should work together, all 4 or 5 of them straight out of the box. That's sort of part of the design, so I hear. I mean, so in the right meta, against the right decks, this deck could be fun. So maybe part of it is talking to the group and seeing if we all have maybe more creature-based kind of things, or maybe more tribal-based kind of things.
Could be. It's always going to be a factor, right? The meta you're playing in. Like, so don't get too down if your friend who has this permission control deck is stopping you from playing your epic experiment deck, where all he's doing is waiting and countering your epic experiment. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that deck's not working.
Right. And I think it's worth a discussion with your group. So what do? We have a discussion with the group and say, like, hey, your permission control deck is very strong, and I don't want you to, like, dismantle or stop playing it, but maybe we can have, like, tiers of decks for us. And, like, maybe that isn't a tier, and I'll brew to, like, fight against that, but maybe we can make room in our meta for a tier of decks that are a bit jankier, so we can try these sillier decks, so decks that are more combo-y, that won't run up into, like, kind of very control-y, very high-tuned decks.
Like, can you imagine playing like you build your brand new Thanos deck, and you bring it up against like an Iona or something, or is that the one I'm thinking of? The one that stops activated abilities? Sure.
Iona, I always mix that one up, and the one where you get to name a color, and color does.
That's Iona. There's another one. Yeah, Iona's the color one, but there's also an angel that stops activated abilities. So it's like, if that card is in your meta, like your deck, your Thanos deck has a #1 enemy, so you either better have a way to deal with that, right? That isn't of this this method of using an activated ability, or you're going to have a bad time. And it's not like you can walk into a playgroup and go, hey, can everyone please not play this one card? Like,
yes,
can everyone please not play this card? I think that's like, it's on you to know how to deal with that, which is why we're talking about this right now. So it's like these are the ways we can deal with this, right? Sometimes it is a discussion of deck level and like competitiveness, right? Sometimes you'll have a very spiky meta and you're like, man, I just want to try this really silly brew. Like, I think it's going to be fun to play, but it's definitely not going to be fun to play against this combo deck that always wins on turn 3, like, right? So that in those cases, I think it's worth a discussion. But if you're talking about like one card's hosing you, you're gonna have to build that. You're going to have to build into that, thinking about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I have a Karlov deck that just absolutely dies if anyone casts any spell that stops life gain. So we had like Erebos, like an Erebos come out in a game, and it's like, oh, well, I better find one of my exile spells or I'm just dead. I just can never gain life, can never make my Karlov big enough to do anything. All my stuff in this deck gains life. So then I had to go back and retool this deck a bit to think about getting rid of the enchantments like Erebos. And there's also one, what's the one with where if any of your opponents would gain life, they lose that much life instead?
Ooh, Liliana
Tainted
and her
Cure?
brother on it.
Yeah.
Tainted Remedy.
Tainted Remedy. Yeah, that card absolutely destroys, like single-handedly destroys a life gain deck and this Karlov deck. So I had to build in lots of ways to deal with that type of stuff. But that's the nature of it, right? Those cards exist out there, so you better be ready for them.
And so there's one other case where you might not be having much fun. And again, people's definition of fun is always different. But I've been in this case too before, where I put a deck together that was almost too effective at what it's doing. So we mentioned Brago before in the No Fun deck. Part of this inspiration was from I put it together a Brago deck. And the whole point, Brago, as you know, if you connect with Brago with combat damage, you can basically flicker any number of your permanents. Just have them leave the battlefield and come right back in. So, of course, you can build in so many effects that eventually will just snowball and lock out all of your opponents to the point where if they do anything, it's like, well, I'm happy for you, but like I'm going to connect with Brago again and just undo everything you've done and put you back even further. Yeah. So it's again, I might be describing this and you might be like, oh, that sounds like a dream come true. That's everything I want to do. And it's like, that's fair. But we're trying to cover, like, if your deck's no fun, as it was for me, my solution in that case, I didn't rebrew it and change Brago. I disbanded that one because I didn't, because once you start toning that down, then you're not really doing anything. And then I'm like, well, this is now, I can't see that becoming fun. So in that case, I just disbanded it.
I actually did disband mine too. When I talked about rebrewing it, we did that for the show, but I didn't actually end up doing that in real life. So sometimes you're going to find that. You're going to find like strategies and cards that you think are going to be like, man, this is going to be great. And then, oh, actually, that's not really my style. I don't really like doing that. You know, I don't like, you know, I talked a lot about in that episode specifically about Voltron and how like it's not going to be for everyone. You know, it's not always a lot to do there. But that's not to say that that you can't brew a version of it that you might like. So, you know, keep looking.
Keep looking. And I think one last thing I want to add is if you're ever not having fun with a deck, you know, and like maybe it's an easy decision. You're like, well, it's just a trial deck and it's no fun. I'll abandon it. But if there's a deck that you know should be fun but isn't fun and you just can't figure out why, I hope you're able to at least bring it up with your group and just be like, hey, can anyone help me out on this? This deck seems like a lot of fun, but I've just never been able to like get anything going with it. Maybe they'll be able to offer you some good advice. Maybe they'll give you some deck brewing advice, or maybe you'll come to the general realization that's like, oh, I think that deck's not working because it seems to be in another tier of decks. And you can get that deck tier discussion going in your group too. I mean, you know, it's no surprise, but bottom line is like talking about problems helps them out more often than not.
It's true. Absolutely true. Or maybe you've stumbled across this here video and this has helped you because of these suggestions and you know, ideas. So great.
Just something to think about. If you've got any other stories of like times where you're just like, you know what, here's how I solved a deck that I wasn't happy with that I wanted to make better or somehow, share it in the comments.
Let us know. All right, we'll see you guys later.
Big thanks to all our patrons who make these episodes possible.
Yeah, and if you want to check out more comedy videos, check out our Brews News playlist.
Make sure you follow us on Twitch TV to see when we play live.
If you want to chat with us, head over to Twitter. We're @CommandersBrew.
And please hit subscribe to ding the bell and find out when we got new stuff coming out.
See you next time.
Bye.